Hello and welcome back to the Enthusiast series here at the Whisky Baron. I'm really excited to be at the Cotswolds Distillery in the heart of England with Rob. Rob, how are you doing?
I'm great, mate. Pleasure to have you here as well.
Thank you so much for having us. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came up to be ended up working at the Cotswolds Distillery.
Yeah, so I've been at the distillery for around 8 years now. Previously, I worked as a cocktail bartender in Italy and then came back to the UK, studied as a sommelier, opened a pub, worked in the wine merchants, and then found myself here about 8 years ago and been here ever since. Started as a junior sales associate and now I've worked my way up through various roles, and I am now the global whisky ambassador, and I also take care of all cask sales. And to say I've got the dream job would be an understatement, really.
Amazing. I mean, you've been here, I guess, nearly since the beginning. So the distillery's been operating for 10 years now?
Yeah, we had our 10th birthday June 31st, and I came just before the whiskey launched. So yeah, I've seen the full journey of launching the inaugural release all the way through to where we are today.
Amazing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the history, how it came to be, how it's based here?
Yeah, I mean, the whole genesis of the Cotswolds Distillery is based around one man, our founder Dan, his love of whiskey. If you imagine you love whiskey as you do, and you have the opportunity to not only start your own brand and start your own whiskey and create a flavor profile that is akin to what you think is what you would want from a whiskey, that's where we are. It was completely around Dan's love of whiskey, his love of living in the Cotswolds, his love of visiting other distilleries, and how he wanted to create three things: a whiskey he would want to drink, in a distillery he would want to visit, in an area that he loves. And so we have Cotswolds Whisky, which is based around having a very soft, fruity style of flavor. We're based in the Cotswolds, so we have about 120,000 people visit the distillery on an annual basis. And it's just about creating a whiskey for people that love whiskey.
Amazing. So you talked about that soft, fruity style. We've obviously got the signature, I think, to start off with. This is effectively your kind of entry point into the Cotswolds.
Yeah, it's always difficult, isn't it, when you have a whiskey that it's the first one you come out with and it's the one that is the lowest ABV, price point. People, you can say entry level, this is your flagship, this is your... I always like to say this is our handshake. This is how I like to introduce ourselves to people, because it does represent everything that we're about. It's 70% red wine STR, it's 30% first of all bourbon. That actually represents our filling as well. So 40% of everything that we fill is red wine STR, 30% of what we fill is bourbon. So it really highlights the majority of what we do with regards to production. It's soft, it's fruity. Cheers.
Cheers.
And it is just about marmalade on toast in a glass. The Cotswolds isn't a West Coast Scottish Hebridean distillery. It's not based on hardcore like wind and rain and rough terrain. The Cotswolds is soft, gentle rolling hills. The only two things that grow here are fruit and barley.
Yeah.
So why not make a really barley driven fruity style of whiskey?
Cool. Well, let's have a sip. Definitely get the marmalade notes that you're talking about.
Yeah.
For me, yeah, there is there's a maltiness to it. It's quite, maybe toast is almost kind of too harsh. It's kind of, there's a bready note, kind of pastry, brioche. It is kind of soft, it's rich, it's velvety on the mouth. 46%, I think it works really nicely. You described it as a little bit of a, with that marmalade note, breakfast whiskey. I think you could drink this at any point during the day when it's acceptable to be having a dram.
Yeah, we're really proud of it. We've had this on the market, exactly the same composition, exactly the same production style since 2017. And, I bottled the first ever batch when we first released it. And
amazing.
I've taken it all over the world, and it's just fundamentally a solid all-rounder whiskey. It's something that you can give to people who, like yourself, you've tasted every style of whiskey there is. You can appreciate the production, but also you can give it to novices. It's got that nice fruity, accessible flavor. The ABV's a nice, decent punch. It's got a good texture. So yeah, well, we just sort of look at it as more of an all-rounder.
Yeah, nice. What I've always liked about the the packaging is you've got this kind of nice like mixed styles on the bottling. You've got the kind of the diagonal label with the batch information, and then the kind of Cotswolds label on the front. And again, I think the box style with all the kind of the gold embossing is really good as well. It's really classy packaging. Was there any kind of inspiration behind that, or was it just a marketing brief? Please tell me it wasn't. There's something.
You'll be relieved to know that as far as marketing and briefs went, that is no element of how our brand came to fruition. This is all the vision of Dan, our founder.
Yeah.
And it really was based around what he would want out of a whiskey. So when it came to packaging, he worked with a guy called Craig at Breeze Creative. He knew that he wanted the Cotswolds branding to be quite prominent, but in the same breath, you need to have all the integral information that somebody who appreciates whiskey would want.
Yeah.
Where do we source the barley? What's the process? What's the barrel composition? The ABV? Is it non-chill filtered? Is it natural? All of the points that reassure someone that they're buying a natural whiskey made from quality. And then actually with the box, originally it was quite grey.
Yeah.
Sort of a grey taupe sort of tone. And when we first went into Waitrose, we realized that colour profile didn't work. We faded into the background, and we wanted to give it a bit more punch. Black and those sort of copper gold tones are part of any whiskey distillery, including ours. So we just wanted to give the packaging a bit more of a punch. But going back to your original point now, it wasn't a marketing brief. It was just about giving whiskey drinkers as much information whilst also retaining our brand information.
Yeah, nice. You've mentioned barley a couple of times, and actually you have the barley type on the front as well, which is unusual. Not a lot of people do that, so obviously the transparency there is fantastic. And you guys actually, you source, is it all of the barley or most of the barley locally?
100% of the barley comes from a single farm in the Cotswolds. So we source from Aikman Street Farm, which is just near Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire.
Yeah.
It's 30 minutes away by car. Michael and Philip Green have been growing barley there. Well, they've had the farm in the family since 1878. And we've been sourcing from them for 6 to 7 years. We've only sourced from 2 other farms in the Cotswolds, Bradwell Grove and Barrington Park Farm. Again, 100% Cotswolds barley, malted, 100% floor malted in the Cotswolds at Warminster. So transparency is everything to us. Where we source the barley, 137 miles is our barley miles as well, which means that from the distillery to Warminster and starting at the farm, we can trace all of our barley miles as well.
That's really cool, and I think there are so few people that can probably even, I'm sure they can through accounting, whatever, trace that barley journey. But to have that level of knowledge about exactly what you're getting, where it is, how far it's coming, is incredible.
Again, Dan created this whiskey distillery based on his love of whiskey, and as you know, when you love whiskey, you're always scratching for more information. So from the outset, what we wanted was to create a brand that is all about transparency. So everything that we do, everything that we create, we'll tell everyone everything.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, this, going back to the signature, I think this is it's a really good introduction to, I think an English style of whiskey or Cotswold style of whiskey. B, I think if you are the kind of person that is maybe newer to slightly higher strength, 46% natural colour, non-chill filtered, moving up from something that's 40%, this is, I think, a really nice, gentle introduction to it, but, packed with flavour and, as with that signature kind of delicate style you talked about before. Yeah,
I mean, we always say it's a good introduction to Cotswolds whiskey, English whiskey, world whiskey, and whiskey in general. If, someone, we always say, if someone ever says the words, I want to like whiskey, but this is what we'd give them. Yeah,
I think with the style, with the bourbon, and even, whilst there is obviously some kind of slightly redder fruit in there from the SDR casks, it's quite gentle, going back to that word. I could see this as also being a bit of a gateway dram for a bourbon drinker or someone that's come in from American whiskey.
Yeah, big time. Those STR casks really work as that bridge, as you just said. Because STR casks are essentially almost like what they would use in Kentucky. They're freshly charred American oak casks, but they have a toasted red wine seasoning underneath as well. You're getting the best of both worlds. So you're getting the cask extraction, but in the same breath, bourbon casks are balancing that big extraction, so you get the fruitiness.
And I guess STR casks have been part of your journey as a distillery from day one. Obviously, Dr. Jim Swan was involved in the setup of the distillery, and so his I guess influence still looms large in terms of the distillery character and spirit.
Yeah, I mean, Jim's influence is all over the distillery with regards to not only the style of the spirit. You know, he came in and made sure that we refined every single process to have a really fruity, bright style of new make. He created the red wine STR cask, especially for working with those hotter climate distilleries like Kavalan, like Amrut. And so the fact that we were able to have a spirit that aimed itself towards the benefits of the STR cask meant that we got all the benefits of sweet fruit, apples and pears in the new make spirit, emphasized char, sugar extraction and color and filtration from the STR. And it boils down to being a really simple process of good into good makes good. And so we don't shy away from the fact that we use STR casks.
Yeah. I mean, wood policy is obviously something we could probably sit and talk about all day if we had the chance. And I know from my own kind of past visit here, and obviously, you know, following you guys for some time, you know, you also work with lots of other different types of wood. You know, I think there's a Pinot de Chronc cask downstairs. There's bourbon cask. There's an STR, an STR cask we're coming to later as well. Sherry casks. We've been in the blending room already. There's you know, there's not really a kind of you're not one of those distilleries that just says, right, we're all bourbon and STR. You fill into just about anything you find interesting, right?
100%, absolutely right. We bourbon and STR definitely do make up quite a lot, but we're also not experimental, but we don't believe that we've got a spirit that only needs to be a single style.
Yeah.
So we source sherry casks from Miguel Martin in Jerez, who we can talk about a little bit in depth because he's a fourth generation sherry maker who pivoted his entire family business towards seasoning casks for sherry cask whiskey. We have quarter casks from Lafroig, so we can have a peated expression, even though peated English malt isn't really available.
Yep.
And then, we've got our exotics, and so Pinot de Chiron, Tokaj, Vermouth, Sauterne, Banyuls, Calvados, Madeira, Moscatel, maple syrup. So we have all of the weird and wonderful that we're learning about. And I think the other thing that is exciting about our wood policy is everything is full term.
Yeah.
So we don't do any finishing. If it goes into that wood, it lives in that wood, and it's a true expression of the cask as well. So everything is first fill, everything is full term, and so we're just getting all of the full extraction of the cask to go into that expression as well. We always say that our spirit is the voice, and the casks are different ways that voice can talk about different subjects.
So that's fascinating that that's the way that you're buying in casks. I mean, obviously, you know, you've got the provenance of what you're bringing in. You know exactly, as you just said, where they're coming from, how you're using them. So you've had whiskey for 7 years. How do you see that potential wood policy changing over time? Is there going to be a Cotswolds 20 or 30-year-old? Like, at what point do you start thinking and planning for a very long-term future and thinking, actually, maybe I do need to start using some refill?
Yeah. You just hit the nail on the head with that final statement. Now that we've scaled up our production and we do have a lot more spirit that we can set aside for different strategies, second fill bourbon and second fill sherry is something we're really going to sort of start leaning into, because you always have to look at different time scales when you're starting a distillery. You got your short term, you got your long term, you got your medium. STR very much fills the void and the gap short term with what you want. Bourbon is not something that you can hide behind. It's a very honest style of cask, but our spirit lends itself to it really well. And then sherry sort of fits halfway in between. So short-term STR, medium-term blending of the two, long-term bourbon, refill. Age statement is something we're not going to go for, simply because we find it could be quite restrictive to the flavor profiles that we create. But long-term, second fill sherry, second fill bourbon, most definitely. We did do some second fill bourbons, like a tiny little tranche, about 10 years ago, and we've released a couple of casks.
Okay.
And it's phenomenal. It's soft and floral and sweet. It's so good. So yeah, more of that to come, definitely.
Cool. I'm going to bring you back to that in a minute, but obviously we've talked quite a bit about STR, and we've got something that I've never tasted before behind me. So this is the current fill your own bottle at the distillery. So this is something that you need to come visit if you want to taste. So tell me all about this cask.
Yeah, so with that journey of STRs, you know, you can achieve quite a lot in quite a short amount of time with an STR, which is why we love it as a young distillery. But also, in a moderate climate, there aren't too many distilleries that are able to sort of say, we've got full-term aged STR casks at 7, 8, 9 years old. And we do. Yeah. You know, we're not Cavalan, we're not Amaret, we're not M&H. We don't have really aggressive climate, so we can only release STR after 5 years and that's it. We did have a concern that STR might start extracting too much from the wood after 5 years. We were wrong. So now we've got 7-year-old STR, 54%, so that lower ABV. Yeah. This is 7.5 years old, and it's actually starting to show a balance between oxidization, a bit more age, and the capabilities of the STR cask after 5 years as well. And yeah, we're really happy with this. Hope you like it too.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously taken on a lovely colour from the cask. That's really interesting because there are plenty of parallels back to the signature whilst being absolutely its own thing. And if you were to take this down to 46%, they would still taste like two very different whiskies.
It just shows another level of what the flavor profile can develop over time, especially we historically, when we first started, we used to age quite a lot of our stocks up at Plutus in Liverpool, RIP. And underneath the Mersey is where the rum vaults where they were stored. There was no variation of winter, summer, day, night. So it was just very much the casks were in stasis when they were aging. We brought everything over the last 2.5 years to the Cotswolds, so now everything is aged now exclusively in the Cotswolds.
Right.
And that seasonality, the day and night, the variation, the diurnal change of everything means that we're seeing a lot more interaction of the wood and the spirit. So we're starting to see that, again, that tertiary flavour coming through with stuff as it gets older. And I think this is a really good example of our whiskey and those casks breathing and working together with a moderate climate, so you get a bit more depth of flavour.
Yeah, for me, the red berries are ramped up a bit more. There's, it's not tart, but it's kind of on a journey towards tartness, especially compared to the softness of the signature. Unsurprisingly, with the extra age, with the extra ABV, there's a lot more wood coming through.
Yeah.
But the tannins and the spices are still quite gentle, and it's all that kind of, you know, cinnamon and nutmeg and kind of baking spice that's coming through.
Like a gingerbread sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're big fans of this, and this is one benefit of age as a distillery. I say age, you know, like I say, we're 10 years old. We're not any of the Scotch distilleries, but one thing that we're finding is we're relying less on cask strength style expressions to try and get the most out of our whiskey.
And it's interesting, like I've seen some people online basically sit there and say, you know, STR casks, you're cheating your way towards getting your whiskey, right? For me, I'm not sure I necessarily see that, because you know, that's like saying you're cheating by being Cavalan or Amaret or Milk and Honey because you're based in a hot country and therefore the liquid is interacting with the wood at a faster pace. And ultimately that's kind of the point of an STR cask, right? Yeah,
I mean, there are loads of ways in which the STR cask on paper, face value, could be seen as just cheating. But I mean, essentially what you're looking at is a new char cask, but it's got some red wine seasoning.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we could really scratch beneath the surface when you talk about what sherry casks are these days, because they're not travelling casks anymore.
No.
Vineyard calorium packs is no longer a thing, so they are just seasoned for the whiskey industry. I think what STR casks allow, especially new distilleries, is cost effective,
Yeah.
high quality, because the seasoning of American oak for wine casks is completely different to the seasoning of oak for bourbon casks. It's got to be a higher quality because the wood is interacting with wine, which is more delicate. And also, putting them through an STR process means that you have consistency.
Yeah.
Not to say anything negative about red wine casks, but there is an element of you could have a sulfuric cask. STR casks means that you don't have that, and as a young distillery doing small amounts, you're not gambling with your maturation. So consistency, cost effective, and then also just getting big flavors for short-term aging as well as the long-term benefits mean, you know, new distilleries need everything they can get, whether it be in a hot climate or a cool climate, and I think STR is the answer to that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that I think with a lot of these things there is a lack of understanding, or even potentially a false understanding of how wood policy works in the industry, and it's something that I think we've been looking to do on this series for a while, is to actually kind of go to a cooperage or go to a bodega or go to, you know, the producer of some of these casks and dispel some of the myths around them, because I think that's what it is. And with STR, it is a myth, and I think it's not been helped by some of the newer distilleries who have potentially used STR to kind of give themselves that boost initially, and then kind of say, oh, do you know what, we're not going to use them for very long. Like we'll get to 5 or 6 years, and then you're not going to see these again. Whereas I think with you guys, it sounds like STR casks are very much at the kind of heart of what you're doing, and you know, and if, don't get me wrong, potentially your long-term planning. You're not planning on abandoning.
We won't walk away from STRs. We love them, and we're very transparent about our love for them, how much we use them. We work with J. Diaz, who is just south of Porto. That is the original cooperage that Jim worked with to create the STR. And it makes good whiskey. And that's why we're all here at the end of the day, is we just want to drink good whiskey.
Yeah.
There's no getting away from the fact that it makes good whiskey. And again, there can be arguments all over the place, but we will always just bold-faced, straight up, just say, we love it, works amazingly with our spirit, and that's it, really.
Cool. So this one, obviously, 7-year-old STR cask, only available at the distillery.
Correct.
How much is a bottle of this going to set you back?
So it's a bit punchy. We're coming in at £125. A lot of our single cask expressions come in at that price point. A lot to do with rarity. I mean, we're such a small distillery in the grand scheme of things that the availability of single casks isn't great.
Yep.
And again, an exclusive to the distillery, beautiful caged packaging that we have bespoke made for us as well. And once it's gone, it's gone. So we won't be, I think I'd say actually about maybe a case or two away from finishing this one.
Okay.
Then once it's done, we'll move on to another cask. And yeah, it's been selling phenomenally well as well.
Cool. So obviously, talked a couple of times, 7 years in terms of whiskey, 10 years for the distillery. I imagine there is a lot of focus on the future, planning. You know, the distillery itself has expanded. When I first came here a few years ago, it was basically just the building that we are sitting in. And now you effectively have a whole kind of new distillery off at the side. So your production has gone from, I don't know, where did it go from and to?
So the original stills going on 2 shifts a day, 7 days a week was 125,000 LPA, so pure alcohol, 125,000. With the new distillery, we have the capacity to do 500,000 LPA, which, you know, in Scotch terms, that'd be a Kilcoman, a Ben Romack, it's quite tiny. But we think for category and for us as a brand, we've got the capability to grow into those stills. Again, have liquid that we can use for current projects, future projects, and laying away some for long term as well. Because the thing with being a new distillery is you're always learning about your liquid. You're learning about what it's going to do short-term aging, long-term, different woods, blending as well. We're only just starting to dive into that as well. So it's always an exploration.
So maybe we can delve into a little bit some of those future plans in more details. Normally once or twice a year, you kind of have a special release, different cask finish that we've talked about before, the different types of wood. Going forwards, I guess that you're 3 years away from 10-year-old whiskey. Are we going to see age statements in the future?
It's a good question, and we never say never, but we don't have anything in the pipeline for an age statement, just because we're always trying to build flavour.
Yeah.
And we completely understand and respect what age statement is within whiskey, be it Scotch whiskey, English whiskey, any whiskey. We do find that we're starting to get flavour profiles with the older stocks that are reminiscent of what you would get from a 10, 12, 15-year-old. We have a little bit of a warmer climate.
Yeah.
We're all about making the biggest, fruitiest new make into fresh wood, that we don't feel that an age statement would give us the benefit we need. And also, we just don't have the stocks. I mean, when we first started releasing whiskey in 2017, we had the inaugural release, which went all over the world. We had a huge event where a lot of it was pre-sold. So the stocks that we actually have that are going to turn 10, that have turned 10, there's so little that genuinely, if we did a 10-year-old, it wouldn't be reasonable to release it, simply because 10-year-old is a ubiquitous age statement in the market.
Yeah.
And we'd have so little that it wouldn't make sense to do it. And that's not to, again, we do not negate the fact that age statement is a part of whiskey, but we just chase flavour instead of numbers. It's easier and it's more, it's better to be transparent about these things.
Yeah, absolutely. So what can we expect then, maybe in the short term? Any snippets of information?
We have those little exotic casks that we're working with. I say little. We don't work with anything smaller than 125 litres.
Yeah.
But we do have pockets of some really cool stuff that is aging. Like I said, we've released Pigny de Charon, Banyuls, Sauterne. We haven't even started to think about the fact that we've got tequila casks, sake casks, Van Jun casks.
Wow.
We've also, like I say, we've got some second fills that are coming up, which were really cool as well. And Alice, our whiskey maker, is just on the beginning of her journey of blending.
Yeah.
So every year we release a harvest series, which is a collaboration with a local artist. So we'll source an artist local to the distillery, take a painting from the artist, give it to Alice. She will then blend a whiskey that she defines as pertinent and a good representation of that painting using casks. We've done 3 so far. She's won golds for the first 2 releases. We've only just released the 3rd, and it's getting really, really good feedback, and we'll taste it later on. And so, yeah, we're only just starting to creep into blending. We're only just starting to look at second fill, older stocks. So we've still got so much more to look at with regards to what we can release, what we can build, so many more flavors to explore as well. And that's the exciting part for us, is that as a distillery, we're only just scratching the surface of what we can achieve flavor-wise.
Yeah, amazing. And I think that experimentation is really interesting and key. I definitely see a lot of people online, people I speak to about whiskey, who get quite excited by some of those seasonal releases, the interesting cask types. And I guess you're also kind of unshackled by some of the legislation you see around Scotch whiskey, which gives you a little bit more to play with, right?
Yeah, I mean, different oak types. We haven't really gone away from oak, if I'm completely honest.
Yeah.
But French oak, Spanish oak, American oak are all part of our maturation. The seasoning, like I say, we've got a whole raft of casks that have crazy seasonings in them that we can play with as well. We don't have any limitations there. So yeah, again, it's all an exploration of flavor. It's all about authenticity of flavor, and we've got so much more that we can do. And again, we've only just started blending, and that's mixing different casks together to build flavors. And I don't think we'll start finishing anytime soon, but I think the combination, we've set out our color palette of flavors, sherry, bourbon, etc. Now we can start seeing what that looks like as creating a single color or a single picture.
Cool. Well, Rob, really appreciate your time. It's been fantastic chatting with you. And I think, we've given people who perhaps haven't been before a little bit of an intro to the Cotswolds, whilst also kind of told them about something a little bit special that they can taste if they are able to visit the distillery. So again, obviously the signature, a great introduction to your style.
Yeah.
If you don't live in the UK, or you're not able to make the trip, where would you recommend people go next once they've tried the signature? Is there something that you think would be a good next place to go?
Yeah, absolutely. So our core range of cask strength releases in red wine STR, bourbon, sherry and peated.
Yep.
They're a really good place to go with regards to how each of those expressions showcases our spirit. Pretty reasonable price point, pretty readily available as well. So I would always push them towards them. And then our seasonal releases, spring for Hearts and Crafts, September, autumn, harvest time for the Harvest series.
Cool. Fantastic. Look, really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for sitting and chatting with us. Guys, really hope you've enjoyed the episode today. I've had a great time chatting with Rob. I'm really enjoying this STR cast, so I'm going to continue to sup on this for a little while. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time at the Whisky Baron and the Enthusiast Series. Cheers.